Boo boo! Welcome everyone to Dr. Lord's channel. Today I am going to be providing a tutorial on how to model Kai'Sa's weapon from League of Legends. This particular weapon comes in so many different forms, and there aren't a lot of great reference images for it. So the process will involve a lot of creativity. And as you go through this process yourself, you might find that you will want to change some aspects of how I modeled this weapon, which is great. Quick side note, if you look up tutorials of people modeling complex shapes, you will often see people creating a mesh and then simply adjusting, scaling, modifying vertices and edges until they get the shape that they desire. What I prefer to do, if at all possible, is to not go this route because it often ends in very complicated geometries. You could get non-manifold edges, you could have issues of printing. It would be great if you could use some more generative tools such as lofting or sweeping, things that are built into Fusion 360. And for Kai'Sa's weapon, it actually boils down to just a few simple geometries. So I think this is a perfect example for teaching how to take an object that might not be obvious of how to model and using some of the basic tools to achieve that. So the way to start, as you would with most new models that you're not utilizing some existing STL file or some rendering of that model, would be to find a reference image. And I have one already on my computer that I'm going to upload. And in Fusion 360, you could do that by either hitting this canvas button or clicking the drop down under insert and pressing the canvas button here. So on my computer, I found an image that wasn't really that great. I blew it up and tried to crop just the weapon portion of it because I don't care about anything else. And here I'm going to put this image. Doesn't really matter what plane you use, but I'm going to make this vertical. So I'm going to use the XZ plane. So I'll click on that. And here you could scale it and change the location of the image. I like to find a point that I will make the origin and kind of build off of there. So this point down here seems like a nice logical place to set at the origin. So I will do that. But before going into that, let me just place this. And I want to make sure that this is a very particular size. And you can do that by going to this canvas that you just added here, right clicking and pressing the calibrate button. With this, I could click any point on my image and then any other point, and this gives me a distance measurement of my model. Let's say I want this to be around 15 or 20 inches long. Let's say actually that I want to make this model in a way that I could achieve it in two prints on my Bamboo X1C printer. So my print bed is 256 millimeters in height. So I will need this weapon to be at most twice that, which is around 512. I'm just going to do 500 because that's a nice round number. So now those 2 points that I marked is 500 millimeters according to this reference image. Now I could adjust the location of this by hitting Edit Canvas and moving it to the desired point. And this is all just approximate. You don't have to be very precise here. We're only going to use this image momentarily we're quickly going to be moving into more of an approximate approach. But that seems pretty good. Let me go ahead and solidify that position. And so the first step you will want to do with most Fusion 360 projects is create a new component. And this allows you to integrate with some of the other tools more easily. So under Assemble here, you could create a new component. I'm going to call this Kai's weapon. Naming is important when you start having a lot of different components or bodies or sketches within your one project. Um, if you don't have good naming, you're going to spend a lot of time just clicking the visibility icon through all your sketches to try to find the one that you care about. So now that we have this component, the very first thing I'm going to do is just draw kind of an outline and then give it some depth. And I'm going to use that as my reference moving forward because I don't really like this image. It's blurry, just doesn't look very nice. So I just added a sketch. I clicked the sketch icon, I went on the same plane, I dragged my image, and I'm just going to do a very rough outline from the origin. And I'm only going to do it on one side. We're going to utilize the mirror tool to mirror this across the z-axis. So this very first thing I made was a line. And now I'm going to go do a fit point spline, which allows me to make some nice curves. I'm going to go onto this point of this line and just kind of follow the shape of this weapon. And with the fit point spline, in order to finish your curve, you'll need to press the enter button. If you press escape, which is something you could do with a line, it'll all disappear. So you need to make sure, remember to always press enter when you're doing a fit point spline. And once you have that in, you could take these and kind of drag it to fit the shape more. So you don't have to be perfect on that first click. So I got the bottom part. Let me grab this and do the side, and making sure to always start at the same point that I ended last. So let me go like that. And again, this is very approximate. This is not going to end up being our final model. Let me drag that up a little. Do another one, going down. Again, remember you have to press enter to finish your curve. And you want to make sure that you hit the z-axis here. And that square box that pops up, that's how you know you're on the z-axis. If I'm off it, it doesn't hit it. But sometimes it'll latch on and you'll see that box pop up. So I'm going to hit enter because I'm done. And there is my fit point spline. If you don't like some of the curves here, you could use this to adjust the curve. You could also move it in and out. This is the tool. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but if you click on one of your points, this green line will pop up, and that is what you use to adjust the curvature. I'm going to drag this point out a little, and there we go. Now we have half of the weapon. Now this reference image, it's like at an angle. I don't really like this left side. There's a gap here. I think generally we know that the weapon's going to be of this shape. So that is good enough for me. Let me quickly draw a reference line for the mirror. So I clicked the line tool, and then on line type, you have this option to either make it a solid line or a dashed line. I'm going to turn on the dashed line. All that means is that the dashed lines aren't actual rendered lines. You're not going to be able to do anything with them. They're just references. So let me put that along the z-axis. You probably could have just used the z-axis axis coordinate to do the mirror. You could find that under origin here. You see all of your axes and planes, but I always like to have this reference line when I do my mirror. So here's the mirror button. If you press it, the very first option is to click the objects that you want to mirror. And in my case, it's all of these lines I created. So I'm going to click on them and they will highlight, showing that those are selected. And then I could press the mirror line option and click on this reference line I just made. When I do that, you'll see the other half pops up. I could press OK. And now that I have a fully filled in surface, all the points are connecting, the weapon here is highlighted in a light blue, which shows that this is a full complete loop, and you could now do things such as extruding this object or thickening it. So I'm going to finish the sketch and go back to my main view. And now I want to extrude this. This is the extrude button. You could also press E. So I just pressed E. And then the very first option is to click on the profile, which is the sketch that we just made. So I click on it. And then you have a few options for your extrude. You can do one side, you could do two sides, or a symmetric. So this is the direction that the thickening is going to occur. I want this to be symmetric around the x-axis. So I'm going to hit symmetric. And then this isn't very important, but generally just trying to think of what we want the side thickness of this weapon to be. I'm going to put 50 millimeters and hit enter. And now we have this rough shape. And this will be our reference moving forward. I do not like this canvas, so I am going to delete it. And I just right clicked on that canvas and hit delete. So now we have our first real 3D reference. If I single click, maybe double click on the component here, I could rename it. And I want to add the word reference so that I could distinguish that from the next component that I'm going to create, which under assemble, you click new component. And here, this will be the actual weapon, which I'll call Kai's weapon. And notice that when I created that component, it just created it within the reference component. So it kind of became a child of this component. I didn't want that. That was a mess up on my part. So you could actually right click, delete, and right now, you'll see if you highlight one of your components, you have two options. You got this view option that turns on and off the visibility, and then this circle icon on the right. If I click it, it means this component is active. So when the component is active, anything you do is going to be under that component. And that's what I had when I created my last component. Instead, I'm going to go up here and do the main component and activate it by pressing that circle. And now I will assemble my new component, which I call Kai's weapon. And so you will see this time, it's not a child of the reference component. It is at the same generation and automatically highlighted to be the current active component. So now we could go ahead and get started actually modeling this. Essentially, we're going to do this with a few lofts and a few sweeps. And we should have our model just about ready at that point. And then we could do some touch-ups. So the very first thing is, for me, I want to start on this bottom spike and then build up. So I'm going to add a sketch on the bottom on the XY plane. And my reference model is still visible. I could toggle it on and off if I want, but this gives me a nice idea of the dimensions I'm working with, which is why we have it, just for scale. I'm going to turn it off for now. And we want to decide what we want our spike geometry to look like. So there's a couple of things you could do. You have a line and you could create some polygon with that line, or you could use a built-in tool. If you go under create, there is a polygon option, and you could do a circumscribed polygon. And if I do that and I click on the origin and then drag out, I have these options for the size and the number of sides. So for the size or the radius of this, this is the very bottom point, so we want it to be pretty small. I'm going to do 5, and then we could always extend on it later towards the end of the model. But you don't want to make it too small because eventually we plan to shell out this object, make it hollow. And if you make a really, really tiny point, you might have some issues with the shelling. So it's better to keep things simple and thick and then do all the touch-ups after you hollow out your weapon. So I have 5 here, and I want to lock this onto the x-axis, and we could do that not in this view, but we'll do that after I create this. For now, I'm just going to put it right here, but before I hit enter, I'm going to press the tab button, and that'll allow me to toggle to the number of sides. And you can see I could change it to 8 or 3 or 4. I'm going to do 4. If you look at images of this weapon, it seems like the main spike is a diamond shape, which is essentially what we want. And we want the sharp edge to be in the front and the back of the model, not on the side, which is what you'd get if you had this square shape like this. So that means we want this to come out at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to click to establish this shape, and I hit escape to get out that window. I realize that my lines here are dotted. So if you hold shift and click on them, you could toggle this construction or dotted icon to make it a solid shape. Now, to get this to be aligned with the axis, I will create a line that is a construction because I don't want it to be part of my actual object. Go to the origin and just drag it to the right. It doesn't matter how long it is, I'll just make it 1. But what does matter is that if you zoom in, you attach to this x-axis, and you'll see this icon here. Let me press escape. You'll see this icon here that shows the constraints that it's on this x-axis. So the way to get this to align correctly, there's a bunch of different ways you could do this. What I'm going to do is click this sketch dimension icon, which allows me to adjust certain parts of my sketch. So essentially, if I click this line here, and then I click this dotted construction line, and then I drag my cursor out to the right location, it should give me an angle, but it's not. Let me try that again. Weird. All right, so another thing we can do then is, so there's a bunch of ways you could do this, and actually another probably easier method. I think I'm gonna have to make my own construction line also going down this direction. So let me click the origin, and put this down. Doesn't really matter where again. So I'll put it right there and then hit escape. And now I should be able to get an angle between these. There we go. So I didn't like that the measurement line, I guess this 5 millimeter line is just a measurement. It's not an actual line, so you can't project any angles or anything off of it, which is fine. So we have this. I'm going to make this 45 degrees. And now you'll see the line pops up and it's constrained to always be 45 degrees. This first line is constrained to the x-axis. The second line is always constrained to be 45 degrees from the x-axis. And now what we want to do up here is use the parallel command, this button, and say that this 45-degree line should be parallel to one of these lines on my diamond or rotated square. So that is it. This is the bottom of our weapon. Let me finish that. And we could toggle the reference back on and give it a nice little look. And now what we want to do is repeat the same pattern, but towards the top. So we need to make a sketch that is at about this height. And we could do that by going to the construction tab and using an offset plane, clicking on the XY plane that we used for our first sketch. And then if I just drag this up to get an idea of the height, and here on the right, these are your like your window adjuster. If I click front, I'll get a nice view that'll really show me how high I am placing this offset plane. So 220, let me do 230, how about 225? Just want to kind of line it up with the top of this portion of our weapon. I'm going to press OK. And now let me add a sketch on this new plane that we created right here. And you might not be able to press it easily because this reference model is in the way. So you might have to toggle it so that you could actually grab that plane for your sketch. So now we are on this offset plane. You could see that it's higher than our original sketch. Let me click the top view, zoom in a little. And here we're going to utilize the offset command. And before we do that, we need to project our original geometry into this new plane. If you press P for project, you could then click all of the edges, and I'm going to make it a construction line because I don't want this to be my actual shape or the actual size. And then I'm going to hit finish. And now you can see we have a projection of our original sketch on our new plane. But I did not mean to complete the whole sketch. So down here on our timeline, let me go back to that latest one, right click and hit edit. And now we could go to this offset command and press, and notice that it conveniently highlights all four sides here. And so this will create an offset of our geometry that we will use for the top. And here we want our reference image just to get an idea of how big this should be. And let's do 40. 40 seems like a good number here. And then hit OK. Now we could complete the sketch. And we could get our first bit of actual geometry in our weapon. So we're outside of the sketch view and we're in the solid tab. We're going to work in the solid tab this entire video. If you hit create or press create and then go down to the loft command, this allows you to take two sketch profiles and connect them. And this is a very convenient tool. So I'm going to press this bottom one, and then I'm actually going to remove my reference, toggle it, and then press this top one. And now we have this nice triangular shape that will act as the main spike. You could play around with some of these options here on the right. I like to just see what they look like. The direction one, that's pretty. You could also hit direction on the bottom one. That's pretty. That actually might be something you prefer. Then you could put a little spike on the bottom. But I am going to stick with connected for both of these for now. You could always adjust these later. So let me hit OK. Go back to our reference, give it a quick look. All right, so that is the main spike. The other four spikes are going to be built a little bit differently. We are going to be using the sweep command, which essentially takes some sketch and sweeps it along a line, or what we would call a profile. So let me hit create sketch and then click on the XZ plane because I want to make right now these profiles that kind of line the direction that we're going to be sweeping. So I'll click the XZ plane and always going to be working on a single side and then using the mirror command to mirror it. So we only care about one side. Using this fit point spline, let me go ahead and pick a point here and then follow it. I don't want to project this reference image because I don't want this new component to be dependent on my reference image in any way. If I ever delete my reference image, that would impact my the actual model. And you might want that dependence, but I prefer to remove dependencies as much as possible. So I'm just going to click roughly where that point is, and then try to follow the center of this main spike here and go all the way up to this point. And then hit enter to finish that. And let's see, I want to drag any of it. Maybe a little bit like this. Cool. Next, I'm going to add a couple more, starting at this bottom point. I want to go up and around the same second point that I did on the first fit point spline. But this time, I want to go right here onto and snap onto the z-axis. Oh, and see, I hit escape. I'm so used to doing that. Hitting escape will completely get rid of that spline. So I need to redo it, and remember to always hit the enter button. Let's get that to snap. Just like that. There we go. And then hit enter. Then we are going to do one more from this top spike. Come down and follow this upper profile. Just like that. Cool. So looking at this, I don't really like how these go into each other. Maybe I'll fix that once we start doing some of these sweeps. But for now, let's leave it. What we need to do now is define a plane along these paths and create some geometry to do the sweeping with. For this weapon, the thickest part is going to be around here in the middle. And when you do sweeps, you could add a taper effect where as this geometry goes along this profile, it gets smaller and smaller. And so we want to utilize that. And so I'm going to create the sketch at what I believe is the thickest point. First, we need a construction plane. And if you click construct and go at plane along path, then you could click one of these paths and I could drag this arrow to be around at that thick position. So I'm going to choose right around here, click OK, and then I want to draw a sketch on this plane. And this is the origin, which is where our um, profile runs through. And so let me go ahead and grab another polygon, center it on that origin. And this time, if I hit tab, I do think I want this to be six-sided. I'll hit tab again. And if I hold down the middle button on my mouse and I hold shift at the same time, I could drag my camera view. And so if I look at it and I try to get a good size, I'm probably going to want to match this with the top of the spike, which was about 40 millimeters from the edge. That actually made it from this top point to this bottom point about 100. It was roughly the width of our reference. So if I take this and I snap it to this axis, and then I make the dimension 50, I know that the entire width of this is going to be 100 millimeters. And I like how the point is facing to the left. So I'm going to press the left button on my mouse to place that object there and then finish my sketch. Cool. It might be a little big, but we will adjust it. Let's try doing one of the sweeps. So click create under this 3D tab and then the sweep command. You could choose this profile we just made. So click on it and then select the curve that we want this to follow. And you're going to get an error at first because this is going to attempt to follow the entire curve. And I really want to do a few sweeps and just use parts of these curves. So let me drag this arrow to just here and this arrow to just here. And now we're starting to get some of the side. I'm going to want this to go all the way to the bottom. Then this, we probably want a different sweep for the top because it's longer. So I'm going to make this one-sided. So a distance of 0 in the top, distance of 0.331 in the bottom. And here is that taper angle. So you want it to be negative, and usually you start with something really small like 1. See how that looks. That hardly did anything, so let me go to 10. It's a little better. Let's try 20 and maybe 25. Okay, and then if I zoom in, I could actually try to drag this down a little more and reduce the taper. Let's stick with that for now. And right now it's set to new body. I want it to join with my original body. It would automatically do that as we started adding more sweeps, but I'll just do it at the start anyways. On the left, under our component, if we expand the component dropdown, you'll see body, sketches, construction. Here we will find all the different things that we've done so far. And we haven't done too much yet, so naming isn't that big of a deal. You'll see towards the end of the video, though, it gets a little difficult to find the right sketch when you don't name everything. So we want to do a sweep again, and we want to utilize the same curve. and the same profile. So I'm going to toggle those two back on. Up here in Create, click Sweep again. Same profile, same path. But this time, I want the bottom to be at 0, and I want to sweep along the top. And let me zoom in to make sure I catch the right profile. There we go. And now here, let's do another taper. Negative, negative 20, way too much. Negative 10. Not sure why it doesn't like negative 10 or negative 1. What did I do? Go back to 0. Figure out. Oh, it just totally got rid of one of the paths. Let me cancel, redo the sweep. So that should be 0. And then, there we go. We want to drag that all the way to the top. Cool. I must have accidentally deleted something there. But let's try negative 10. That looks pretty good. All right, let's join it. And now we need to do these bottom two curves. And each of these are going to need their own new construction plane because I want to start in the middle. So let me click on this, make a plane right there, and also make another plane on the bottom section all the way at the end right there. Now let's add on each of these planes a sketch, and let me toggle this last plane off so it's not in the way. And again, I am going to do a 6-sided polygon with, not a 50, 6-sided polygon with a 50 millimeter length. And if I look around, I want the top point to be facing up. So I'm going to snap this to this axis here. We could finish that sketch and then do another one. And we want to toggle this plane I just made invisible. Click on it. And let's go ahead and make another 6-sided polygon. And let's do 35, just kind of guessing a little bit on the dimension. But 35, snap it to this axis. Oh, it's a little off, but that's okay. To verify that this is lined up correctly, let me go ahead and draw one of these construction lines. The construction line should snap onto our axis. There we go. You could see the slight blue symbol showing that it matched. And with a 6-sided polygon, we could actually just make the side parallel to this construction. And let me go to my last sketch and just really enforce that it should be symmetric across each axis. Let me draw another sketch line, snap it. Oh, you can see it's a little off, so snap it right there. Hit enter, and then use the parallel constraint. Click that, click one part of your polygon, and now it's constrained. So we have these two. Again, we're going to use sweep. We're going to click on one profile and then the path. And here and automatically decides that I want to use this as a cut, but I don't. I want this to join. And again, I'm going to want some taper. Let's do -5, see how that looks. Do something a little more, 10. That goes nice and into this profile. Cool. One thing I'm noticing is when we do our mirror, the right side is not vertical, it's slanted a little bit. So when you mirror this, you're going to have this hole here in the middle, and that's going to cause some issues. So we need to fix this profile a little bit. Let me go to the sketch that has that profile, which as you highlight over your options down here, when I go to the profile sketch, you could see it highlighted. So I know that's the one. And let me go ahead and draw a reference line along the z-axis. Doesn't matter what the length is. Let me go ahead and draw one for this side too. And recall that when you click on these points in a fit point spline, you can see the green and start adjusting the curvature a little bit. So I realize I actually need a line that it's going to be parallel with. So let me put that there. Tiffany, come here. Don't be barking. Hey. Dogs. Okay. Drawing that there and grabbing this. Oops. Grabbing this point here, and you could just drag it. And actually, instead of dragging it, let me hit escape, use the parallel, and do that. And I probably could have just hit the perpendicular, which I'll do with this one. Click that green line, and then the axis I want it to be perpendicular with. And so you can see now that these come perfectly sideways. If I finish the sketch, my profile is updated to be nice and in line. When I do a symmetric or a mirror along the z-axis, it will turn out pretty well. So again, I want to sweep lastly this last profile and this path. And I just wanted to get a little bit of an arc. And it looks like this arc is a little too extreme for the size. Oh, always pressing the wrong one. For the size of my sketch. As soon as I get to here, the curvature is having issues because this hexagon, not hexagon, the six-sided polygon is it is a hexagon. It is too big and it is intersecting itself, and so it's having issues rendering. Maybe a taper will fix that for a little bit, but it seems it's still having issues. So, actually it's not. You could see it right there, but it's not quite what I was hoping. I'm going to press OK. I'm going to go back to that plane that has the paths, and I'm going to adjust this one. I really wanted it to be a nice curve downward. Let's do that. And that looks a lot better. Now let's adjust this sweep. Pull it down. Okay, click OK. And notice that this created some issues with one of my other sweeps. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here. This one, it looks like recall we did 0.4. Let me increase it. Let me actually just redo this entirely. Click this, click the profile. Okay, so this was actually a different sweeper. Weird. Where is the top piece? There it is. So yeah, it like hopped over. Let me hop this back onto the right side. There we go. Okay. And then this bottom one too, we could extend that a little bit. So let me drag this down. Again, we want to join. Okay. So this very last sweep, sticking out a little bit. We probably could fix that with a little bit bigger of a taper. It's a little too much. Let's try 12, maybe 11. If we look at that, yeah, it seems like it's just barely popping out. So let me do 11.2. Perfect. All right, so we have that. Now let's go ahead and mirror it. So under create, you will find the mirror command, and you want to click features instead of objects or bodies for object type. And then you could click on your 4 different sweeps that you did, and then press the mirror plane and click on the YZ plane. And you'll see that pop up. Looks pretty good. The compute type, I usually do identical because I want it to be identical. You could do something else, adjust, which it still will be identical, but it uses more compute power. I'm not quite sure when you'd want to do it adjust, but you could just stick with identical unless you start having issues, and then maybe play around with some of those options. So one thing I'm noticing here right now, if this sticks out a little bit, we could play around and kind of fix that. We could loft this to the edge, or we could add a new shape right here. I think though, I just am going to make this body a little bit thicker. So let me go to this profile, this sketch. Instead of 50, let's do 55 and see what happens. So it looks a little better, but it's still sticking out. So let me go to this original one, the second sketch, edit it. Instead of 40, let's try doing like 30, 35. All right, point is almost gone. Let's go back to our main body, which is this one. And adjust that to like 57. Should be good. Cool. So now we got the rough shape of our weapon. Now to do a couple modifications, and then we're going to cut it, hollow it, and add some touch-ups. So one thing, actually, I need to fix the edge here. Let me go to that sweep and pull it up a little more, just so it goes into the body, so it has a nice transition. All right, so one thing I want to do here is make this a little bit more of a curve. Right now it has this point in the middle. Don't really like that. So I'm going to add a sketch here, and I'm going to press P to project and project these 2 points here, or these 2 curves on the top, and hit OK. I don't want it to be construction lines because I'm going to use it. I'm going to go to this point right here and yeah, going to use the mirror command again for this, but let me maybe go like there and then snap it to this axis. I hit escape again, did not want to do that. Go here, about there. Okay, and then snap it to the axis, hit enter, and make sure it's not overlapping, which it's not. Now I want to draw a construction line just along the z-axis so I could use it. Doesn't matter how long. And use the mirror command to mirror this sketch I just made. Oh, just this sketch. And then the mirror line is the recent vertical construction line I made. So now you'll see it's highlighted in light blue. We could finish this sketch, and I am going to extrude this. Press E to extrude, click on it, and if you do a symmetric extrude and you just kind of go all the way out and cut, now you have a nicer, smoother top. All right. Let's go ahead and cut this whole thing in half and start hollowing it out. So if you go to modify, you could find a split body and you could press this body and split it off of some plane. We didn't make the plane yet, so I'm going to escape, make an offset plane on the XY, based off the XY plane, and figure out a nice point to split. If I click the front again, you'll get a good reference view of where you'd want it to split. And I'm thinking, just kind of trying to fit a nice spot on the geometry, maybe like closer to this point up here. So maybe 65 or 63. That seems pretty good. Hit OK, and there is our split plane. So modify, split body. This should be one body, but I'm noticing it's actually highlighting a few. So before I split, I do want my bodies to all be one. And you could simply do that by hitting modify, combine, and clicking on all three of these bodies. And you'll see that there's a target body, which is the name that this new body will become, and then the tool bodies that are going to be joined. So now we have one body. Now I should be able to do modify, split body, click on the entire weapon, and then for splitting tools, I'm going to use this plane. Hit OK, and now we have two bodies here. You could toggle the top, you could toggle the bottom, and so forth. And I don't need these reference sketches visible anymore, and I don't need that plane. So let me put my bodies back. What we want to do is hollow this out, but before we hollow it out, let me make a handle because I don't want the ends of those handles kind of protruding into the hollowed out model. So one more time, let's do a sketch on the XZ plane, and we're going to use sweep. So I'm going to use this fit point spline. And actually, instead, what makes kind of a nicer curve, a more symmetric curve, is under create. If you go to arc, you could do a 3-point arc. And with this, you could pick 2 points on the side and then a middle point along this axis to have a nice clean curve. First, I want to project this point and this point, that'll be the ends of our handle. Now I could go to that 3-point arc, click on those 2 points I projected, and then figure out sort of the general shape that I want, which I think is about that. Finish. So we have our path for sweeping. Now we need a plane along this path, and we want to define our profile that we're going to sweep. I want this to be exactly in the middle. So I'm going to do 0.5 here for the distance. And now I could go ahead and do a sketch. And here is a centered circle command. Here's the origin. Let me click on it. And let's do something like 25 millimeters. We will finish that sketch. Go to create and sweep. And now we could click again our profile and our path. And here is our handle. Let me click join, bring it into our weapon, just enough so that the edges are hidden. I'm only going to work on one side, and then I'll just copy the results to the other side. For this, before we're done here, we do want to figure out maybe a good taper. 1 seems okay. Kind of like 2. 3 seems maybe a little too much. So let me do 2. And then on the left side, we will mirror the distance we have on the right, just so it's nice and symmetric. And there is our handle. And to verify it's part of body 5, you could toggle it to see if it toggles with the body. Cool. Let's start hollowing this out. So we have a shell command. Let me click on the top surface here to shell. And then the number you put in here is the thickness of the resulting walls. So maybe something like 4 millimeters is a sturdy thickness, but one that still allows you to maybe see through or put in some lights in here and have those lights propagate through those walls. So this looks fairly decent to me. Let me hit OK and do the same thing with the upper body. Shell that out, do 4. And this one gives us a little bit of an issue, and it's probably because of our handle. So let me actually, one way you could verify that is you could drag this timeline to before we did the handle and see if you could shell this at 4. And we can't, so there actually is another problem. And maybe it's those top pieces. It's always hard to know what the issue with the shell command is, but you could just keep reducing the value until something works out. So 0.1 seems to do it, but this is way too thin to print. And I think actually the issue is going to probably be where we cut it. So I might want to do a different cut. So let's bring our timeline back out. Could make our bodies visible. Let's go ahead and we did the split. Let's adjust the edit feature, adjust the offset plane that we did the splitting on. Let's just bring it down to 360. All right, so now it looks like the top is still able to split, or sorry, the bottom. Now let's try to get something in the top. Okay, so it did make it better because we could split at 2. We could split at 3. We can't split at 4. I think 3 is still good for security, and it would be better for LEDs. So I'm going to stick with that for this tutorial. But if I really wanted it to be 4, I would again adjust that offset plane to be at a different height where some of these intersections between the edges of the weapon aren't interfering with that shelling. I want the bottom thickness to be the same as the top thickness. We are going to make these two snap in together. So the top is 3. I'm going to make the bottom 3. And now we have 2 pieces with the same um, hollowed thickness. All right, going to the top, let me create the wedge that will allow us to snap these two halves together. And so I'm going to add a sketch, and I want to add a sketch right on this plane here. And since we cut it, we split it, it's a nice flat surface. We could just select it for our sketch. We don't have to create a special plane. And so I'm going to click that. And essentially I want to make 2 hooks, opposite hooks on the bottom and top. So I'm going to use the project command, and I'm going to project the edge of this weapon all the way around. And there are these tiny little corners here, which is likely the issue of shelling at 4 millimeters for the top piece. Yeah, let me go all the way around. It could be a little tedious. You could click just on this entire middle piece, but I have OCD and I don't want the other side to be projected as well. So, okay, we'll project that. And now, typically with 3D printing, if you wanted things to snap in, uh, generally 0.4 millimeters is kind of the rule. I like to do a little more. So I'm using this offset. I'm going to offset this entire top. I want to go inward, so I need a negative for this. And I want 2 offsets, one at -1 and one at -1.7. So the 0.7 to, or yeah, the 0.7 extra distance here, that's going to be the hook. And the 1 is just going to be the distance away from the edge where that hook lives. Let me finish that sketch, and I want to extrude. And I'm going to start by extruding both of these up. I'm going to extrude them up by 2 millimeters. And then I'm going to, again, extrude, but now I'm only going to extrude that little extra 0.7 distance that we made. So I want to turn my sketch back on so I can see it and find just, like, move my cursor until just that little bit, that extra bit is highlighted. There we go. And instead of going up by 2, I'm going to go up by 1, and I want it to cut. And so the cut operation is set. So we have this hook. It's very sharp. To make it snap in easier, we'll want to round the edges. You could either do a fillet or a chamfer. A chamfer is more of like a very strong, sharp edge, whereas a fillet is rounded. So I want to take the bottom parts here and chamfer them. So let me go around and select all those. And we're going to repeat this process on the top part as well, except kind of in reverse. It's not going to be completely symmetrically reversed. Um, you'll see the differences, but it is very similar. All right, so a chamfer of maybe, let's just start throwing one in there. Probably have an issue because there's not enough distance for that one to work. So let me try 0.7. I think that is an issue because it was 0.7 away, so it has to be less than that. So we can do 0.69, and that worked. And so you can see now there's that slope on the inner edge. Let me do the fillet. Give me 1 sec. Go ahead. All right. So now we want to select the top line going around this entire model. Make sure to always press the top and not a line underneath it. Oh. So you may want to zoom in just to make sure you're really clicking the correct line here. Okay. See there, I just clicked the wrong one. And I'm always having to zoom out just to kind of get this angle, reference angle correct. If you click again on the line, it should undo it. But I can't seem to grab that one. There it is. Cool. Got the right one. Just need this last quadrant. All right, and then we'll do a chamfer of 1, and you can see that it now has this nice rounded top to it. Awesome. So now let's repeat that, but for the top surface. Get rid of that sketch. This isn't going straight down. We need a little bit of thickness on this wall. So I'm going to extrude this entire piece up 2 millimeters first. And then I'm going to redo that sketch. So I could, let's see, should be able to view them. I don't see them. That's okay. Again, let me project this top. Click OK, and then use the offset, and it was 1.3. This time we need a negative, and another offset of negative 1.7. Finish that. Cool, so now we need to extrude, but this time we're going to be cutting. We're going to be cutting down to mirror the opposite of the bottom piece. So let me click both of these and go down to cut it. I guess there is an easier way to do that. I could have just extruded that one piece up 2 millimeters, but there are many ways to do things. Now that we have that cut, we do want the top part here. We need that to actually have some material. Just that 0.4 millimeter gap there going all the way around. So I'm going to bring that down by 1 millimeter and have it be a join. And so now you have the reverse of that hook. You could one. Okay, there we go. So now those two pieces should snap together. And now we could just do some final cleanups. And there's lots of ways we could clean this up. Um, Something I would suggest is doing like an offset plane on one of these edges. You could bring it up maybe 20 millimeters and then adding a sketch. And in this sketch, you can project your surface and offset that to about, I don't know, -5 maybe, or -10. And then you could loft this corner up so that you kind of clean up the tips. So let's loft that to the center and play with some of these options. Maybe we want to do something like that. That looks good. And again, we can mirror this feature along the the YZ plane. Let me zoom out, find that. There it is. Do identical, and now you can see both sides of the weapon have that new touch up at the tip. So I'm going to leave the rest of this cleanup as an exercise. I will share this link with this video. And thanks everyone for watching. I hope you guys learned some things about Fusion 360 today. And it was a pleasure going through this and showing you all how I would model Kai's weapon from League of Legends.